To spend a few minutes with us this afternoon and talk some Panthers and talk some Matt Corral, though I cannot help but ask you, Jonathan, about something that I saw on your Twitter feed. I mean, I can't not ask the question. You've been with the same barber for 30 years, and you feel like it's time to make a change. How is this going to play out?
You know what? I don't know. I have trouble within my relationships breaking up with people when things don't go right. So I'm having trouble figuring out, the words to tell my long-time barber who first cut my hair when I was 1 year old. So I really do not know how this is going to play out.
All right, so my assumption is that your barber is not listening to this show, so you can just level with us. What's the issue? Why is it time for a breakup?
I just, you look at your haircut and there's just some things like that are wrong every time, and I'm very picky about my hair, so I just think it's time.
Okay. That's fair enough. I'm going to follow you on Twitter because I want to keep up with how this turns out. You can follow Jonathan on Twitter at John, Jonm Alexander. So the Panthers take Matt Corral, and maybe a little bit later than some people thought he was going to go based on some of the conversations pre-draft, certainly later than some people in the state of Mississippi hoped that he would go. Just at the surface level, what do you make of this pick for Matt Corral and for the Panthers?
Yeah, I think for the Panthers, they're in desperate need of a long-term future quarterback, and when they drafted Matt Corral, or when they were scouting Matt Corral and looking at his film, they thought that he could potentially be their answer. But they weren't sure. They had their reservations as well, which is why likely why they didn't take him at number 6 and instead waited. But, I think he'll definitely have a chance to compete given the Panthers' uncertainty at quarterback. Sam Darnold has struggled. Panthers know that. And I think Matt Corral right now has a chance to kind of prove that he should have been drafted late in the first round or the second round. And he'll get his opportunity for sure.
So when Corral had his pro day at Ole Miss, there were two coaches that really seemed to lock in. I mean, almost every team was there. Matt Rhule was one of those guys, and I don't know, maybe that's the way he approaches every workout that he goes, but it feels like because Carolina was looking for a quarterback in this draft that maybe he was even more locked in. Has Rhule talked publicly about what he saw or what it was that he liked about Matt Corral?
Yeah, they really liked his quick release, the way he threw the ball. They say he had the quickest release of any quarterback in this draft class. They liked his attributes. They always, my sources had told me they always had Matt Corral among their top 3 quarterbacks in their class. And there were always things to like about him. Source once told me during the combine that they thought he was one guy a team source, that he was one guy to look out for. So I think he's always been on their radar. They've always liked the way he throws the ball. There were some concerns that they addressed with him, apparently off the field concerns. But after speaking with them, they felt comfortable. They trusted him, and he seemed sincere with it, according to Matt Rhule in his press conference.
If you go back to that number 6 overall pick in the first round, where they take Ekwonu out of NC State, does that make it easier to take a quarterback if you're kind of establishing things on the offensive line? Or maybe I'm not asking that the right way. Maybe I'm asking about the dynamic of if Sam Darnold's not the long-term fit, when do you feel comfortable making that transition? Because if you decide to start a rookie, you want him to be moving into the best position possible. And I feel like solidifying the offensive line and bringing in a new quarterback kind of go hand in hand.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because, one of the major reasons why Sam Darnold has struggled, since his time with the Jets is because he hasn't had an offensive line. And he definitely didn't have an offensive line this past year. The Panthers were one of the worst in the league. And I think they were the worst, actually, in giving up pressures and the 5th worst in sacks. And it had a direct effect on how Sam Darnold performed. And they knew they had to get that shored up this year for any quarterback to be successful, and especially for a rookie quarterback in Matt Corral, who, they want him to be able to develop the right way. They don't want to put him in uncomfortable positions. But I also think that a lot of the Panthers staff members' job will be on the line this year if they initially start to struggle out of the gate and the Panthers start to feel that pressure. And they feel like Matt Corral can help them. I believe that they'll give Matt Corral a chance, and he'll have his opportunity to perform.
Visiting with Jonathan Alexander, covers the Panthers at the Charlotte Observer. You can follow him on Twitter at John, J-O-N-M, Alexander. That's where I wanted to go next. I mean, the pressure on Matt Rhule. There's been a lot of talk about, hot seat. Is his seat as hot as it has been? Does it kind of depend on how the season begins? What's the level of pressure on Matt Rhule in terms of job security going into this year?
Yeah, I think a lot of coaches around this league, are given a 3-year window. And, Matt Rhule, in his first 2 years, has struggled at 10-23. But David Tepper went on the record to say he was pleased with a lot of the changes that they've made in the offseason in hiring a veteran coaching staff and shoring up the offensive line and locking up a couple of other, young guys who have futures with this team. However, I do think that does add a little even more pressure. When you make the changes you make and you improve the roster, you have to win now. And I think, if Matt Rhule can win 9 games or get in the playoffs, I think he does last another year. But if he fell short of that and there is another losing season, I just can't see a way that David Tepper would be able to keep him or will keep him.
John, the interesting thing to me about Rhule, we've seen so many times college coaches try to make the transition to the NFL, and it rarely works. Sometimes it does, but it rarely works. And yet, there were so many people that talked about Matt Rhule. This is one of the times where it's going to work. His temperament makes sense. The way he runs an organization makes sense. The way he handled a difficult situation at Baylor made sense for him to make this transition. What has gone wrong in this transition? Is it anything Matt Rhule related, or is it simply the roster that he inherited?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think he did inherit a roster in a terrible situation as far as contracts and the Panthers were tied to a lot of older veterans and had to part ways, and Matt Rhule had to make some tough decisions, and that rubbed the Panthers fan base the wrong way. However, this is a results-based business, and 10-23 isn't going to get it done. And I think there were a couple of decisions along the way that a lot of people felt, were the incorrect decisions. Like, for instance, the Panthers decided to part ways with Teddy Bridgewater for just 1 year after his 3-year, $63 million deal. That turned out to be the wrong decision at this point. The Panthers passed up on Justin Fields. They passed up on an all-pro left tackle in Rashawn Slater. So I think it was those particular decisions that seemed like easy decisions on the outset that Matt Rhule kind of made that kind of hurt the Panthers at this point. I think they have kind of contributed to the Panthers' struggles. However, he has this opportunity this year. They have a deeper roster, and now he has to win.
True or false? Matt Corral starts a game in 2022 for the Carolina Panthers.
I think it's true, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I do think the Panthers are going to be better, and they're going to protect the quarterback a lot better. However, I just haven't seen enough from Sam Darnold to convince me that he can be a consistent starter for 17 games. So I do believe at some point Matt Corral will start.
All right, I was going to say, let me add a layer to that. True or false, Matt Corral starts a game for the Carolina Panthers before Week 9?
I think it's true.
Ooh.
That's been my prediction all along. I think if the Panthers get off to a 4-4 start, they'll be really feeling the pressure. I think some people even in the organization feel like they wouldn't even make it if they started 4-4. So I think any mistake or any feeling of them not being confident in Sam Darnold will cause them to allow Matt Corral the opportunity.
Great insight, Jonathan.